anytime you notice anything going on with your fish, or if you lose a fish, we really need you to bring a water sample down to assist at the store, and a little video so we can see everything going on. So we do have some ammonia, we've got lots of nitrite, we do have some nitrate. KH was 0, which I'm very concerned about. pH is probably just above neutral, and GH was super high. So we definitely want to be aware of that. Something you really want to be aware of when you're looking after an aquarium is your GH and KH. Now, if your KH is 0, then it will affect the fish. It will definitely affect turtles or any other animals like that, because carbonate is an essential element for life. It's essential for plants, it's essential for fish, and it's essential for good bacteria. So if your KH level goes to 0, sometimes you can also notice the water won't go clear. And that's because the good bacteria won't grow properly in the filter. And over time, the KH naturally tends to fall, whereas GH tends to naturally raise. So they're just two things to be very aware of. You want to know what KH and GH your fish require, and you want to be testing it on a semi-regular basis. Generally, even if you test it sort of every quarter, sometimes that's enough if you're doing the same thing all the time. But you never want to overlook GH and KH, or they will bite you over time. Particularly fish like Oscars, they're famous for doing what's called flip-flop. And flip-flop is where they basically lie on their side. And they'll typically do that if they're getting too much protein in the diet. I've also noticed that they do tend to do it if your KH level's 0, or if there are other water quality or stresses. So it's almost like sulking. So if that happens, bring us down a water sample and a video, and it does mean there's something to correct. And as far as a fish tank is concerned, a fish tank is 50% water quality and 50% food quality. Fish keeping is 50% water quality and 50% food quality. Now, as far as food goes, this is about the best food you can buy. So I'm very happy to see that. But I would also recommend to these food, I would add some Spectrum probiotics. And because they're relatively large fish, I'd probably go for the large pellet. Now, with a lovely big filter like this one, when we clean it out, if the filter is relatively dirty, then you probably should be doing it more often. If you clean it out and it's pretty clean, it's not that dirty, then you probably don't need to do it as often. If in doubt, when you take it apart, make a video of it and then bring it down to see us at the shop. Let us have a look at the video. That way we can see what's in it, and then we can tell you if you're cleaning it regularly enough. So most people will clean a filter like that about once a month. Also, activated carbon is a wonderful thing to get into the filter. So if we put, say, about a third of this in there, and then in a month or maximum 2 months time, we're going to chuck that out and then put another batch in, and that will really help any discoloration or smell. And at the moment, this tank does have some discoloration, it does have some smell, so that would be very good to add that. But we just don't want to forget about it and leave it in there forever, because it will release what it's collected eventually. The other thing too that I'd like to see go in there is the polyfilter. Polyfilter is like magic, because it will adsorb and absorb anything impure out of the water. So polyfilter is a wonderful thing to put in there. And then just be aware that nothing is going to function in here properly if your KH level is 0, because carbonate is an essential element for all life. So we cannot run a tank with 0 KH. Also, the GH is quite high. So one of the things that cause you trouble with GH is if you're using too much of this stuff. So you want to work out how much you need, and you know, if you add a little bit too much, it's okay. But if we just keep putting more and more and more of this in, then it'll give us a really high GH reading, and there can definitely be problems if you way overdose this product. Now, the other thing to be very aware of is it's amazing how much an aquarium evaporates. And if you run a water level of there, because it's a turtle tank, and then you do a water change down to there, it's very possible that it evaporates to there, and then you do a water change to there. Now, what that means is when the water is evaporating, that means that things like GH that build up in the water will keep building up in the water. So one thing that's a good idea is just top the aquarium up to where it's meant to be, then do your water change. That will help stop the concentration of salts and things. So with your aquarium, if you're getting ammonia or nitrite, then you really want to be looking at the filter, and you want to be looking at your general water quality such as KH and GH, and you want to make sure there's plenty of oxygen in the aquarium. And if you get nitrate, then that's the one that is going to be your water changes. So if your nitrate level is low, then as a generalization, you're probably okay with your water changes. If your nitrate level's coming up, then you probably should be doing more often water changes. Now, when you're topping up an aquarium, regardless of whether it's for a water change or for a top up, in a perfect world, you would fill up a bucket and you'd add a tiny bit of prime, just the right amount. Don't go silly and add way too much. And then you put that in the water, and then you put the water in the tank. Now, if that's not an option and you're going to use the hose, that's no big problem, but try not to do too big a water change. And then during the process, you can add some of this. Otherwise, what you might want to do is turn your filter off, so all your bacteria is safe in there. Then fill the tank up, then add a proper dose of prime, and then you should really be okay. Water ager. If you're dosing the bucket, then you've got to use the right amount for the bucket. If you're putting the tap straight into the tank, you do need to use a full dose for the tank, because the prime will stabilize on a lot of other things, not just chlorine and chloramone. So for this tank, let's say 2 caps of them would be fine to dose the tank. So once again, if you're refilling this tank with a hose, I would turn the filter off, I would fill the tank up, I would dose in my 2 caps. Within 3 seconds, it'll be stabilized. Then you can turn the filter back on, and then you're in business. So that's the way you could do it. The best way would be to get a bucket, treat the water in the bucket before you put it in the tank. But because it's a relatively large tank, then it's not what most people do, even though you should. Now, with an aquarium, it's really important that you're conscious of things that you put in the aquarium. Because if you went and put something like a house brick in there, and if there was an external paint on the house brick, it is possible that the paint contains anti-mold agents and so forth that could actually not be good for your tank. So be careful what you put in your tank. Now, oxygen is one of the most important things for an aquarium. Now, if you look at this aquarium right now, it has very good gas exchange. So you can see that the water is very well broken. And oxygen is one of the most important things. So if you went and filled this tank up too much, let's say you filled it up to there, then that gas exchange won't happen. You'd have to pull the pump up. And then over here, we've got another filter outlet. And then if we filled the tank up too much, that filter outlet, instead of splashing into the water, would then be under the water. So with this particular tank, which was a turtle tank, down here it's a very good level. Up here, it's possible that your water's quite flat. Now, if your water is flat, because the pump's right down there, and this one is down there, but if you filled it up to here, and if the water was flat, then the gas will not exchange, and that means your redox potential and dissolved oxygen level will go down, and that will cause you all sorts of troubles.